Welcome to session 1 of the ISHMap Symposium on Map Fixations, Borderlands. I am Matthew Edney, and I'll be moderating this session with the assistance of Alina Camargo and Isabel Long, who are the secretaries. You can find us in the list of participants under Moderator and Secretary. This is the first time I've moderated a session in an online conference, and I don't know what I'm doing. So let alone have a Zoom with so many people. So I hope it all goes well. I do need to lay out the ground rules as we start. The speakers, we have 15 minutes for each presentation. I will give verbal warnings as we get to 3 minutes left, 1 minute left, and 0 minutes left. For everyone, we will hold questions until the end. And then send me, as in the previous plenary, send me your discussion, your questions for the speakers through private chat. Send them to me as moderator, please. And finally, please keep your microphones on mute unless you are talking. So our first speaker is, our second speaker is Mariana Pereira Gama of the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. Mariana, please share your screen and start your presentation on the territorialization process in southern Brazil in the later 18th century. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. First, I will be sharing my screen, so I'll be ready. And I did it? Yes. Okay, hello, everyone. And first, thanks for accepting this proposal. And I prepared a text to make sure I'll be able to finish it on time. And as an undergraduate student, this work is the result of a research developed within the project Deconstructing Maps, Military Engineers, and the Cartographic Production on the Southern Border of Portuguese America, coordinated by Dr. Fabio Kuhn. So I will be talking about the cartography of José Custódio de Sá Faria and the territorialization process of Rio Grande de São Pedro in the second half of the 18th century. This paper deals with José Custódio de Sá Faria's performance as a cartographer within the context of the Luso-Hispanic conflicts that took place in Rio da Prata in the second half of the 18th century. The objective of this research is to quantify the incidence of Portuguese toponymy in Sá Faria's maps, which refer to the dispute areas in the territory of Rio Grande de São Pedro, seeking to analyze whether the hypothesis of toponymic appropriation for the process of expansion of the Portuguese border is verifiable in cartography. With the signing of the Treaty of Madrid in 1150, there is the establishment of new legal principles, such as the ut possidetis, which consists of the idea that whoever occupies a territory has priority in its ownership. Within this new principle, valid throughout the second half of the 18th century, the demarcation of the bordering territories between the crowns of Portugal and Spain was carried out. This task implied in the sending of technical teams to South America by both countries, and more specifically, there was the presence of military engineers within these teams. Educated in military academies, originated in the process of employing a cartographic and scientific culture headed by Azevedo Fortes in Portugal, these engineers, besides their other roles, were responsible for the production of several maps about the explored American territory. José Custódio de Sá Faria was one of those renowned engineers, having portrayed prominent roles, sometimes as a cartographer, other times being in administrative positions in office. For methodological purpose, Sá Faria's activities in the territory of Rio Grande de São Pedro can be divided in two moments. First, as the one responsible for the demarcation of territories of the Southern Committee during the expeditions of the Treaty of Madrid, and second, when he became governor of Rio Grande de São Pedro during the Spanish invasion of the region. In both moments, as well as throughout his military career, he had an extensive cartographic production. Among these maps, for the purpose of this research and targeting those that denote a greater coverage of the analyzed territory, only 6 were selected. 3 maps from the 1150s and 3 maps from the 1160s. And this is the first map, about this territory made by Faria, and it's from 1156, as well as the second one, the same year. And this one is from 1159, and the third map from the 50s. And about the 60s years, this is from 1163. And about this one, I don't have its exact date, but by the legend, we know it was made by the 60s because Faria already appears as the governor of the territory in the legend. In the map, we can see that. And the last one, the biggest map, is from 1167, and I will be back on this map. So regarding our methodology, we are inspired by Brian Harley, who deals with maps as constructions that don't necessarily represent the terrain in a realistic manner. Within our methodological options, this research also adopts Thiago Oliveira's proposal of the map as an expressive rhetorical discourse of power relations, which consists of the analysis of these maps as elaborations that aim at the achievement of certain political objectives and intents. Nevertheless, for this analysis, the maps must be placed within their production contexts, which in this case is the dispute between Portugal and Spain from the frontiers of South America, the Utposidades context, the indigenous policies of Pombal, and given this a context in which the act of naming a territory becomes of greater importance. According to Tagolin, referring to the context of the second half of the 18th century, quote, "The name was linked to human occupation, to the belonging, and the demarcation of the territory. The act of naming is part of the historical phenomenon. It integrates the identifications, the registration of individuals and social groups in the territory, and it maps their existence, given them the temporality of space." End quote. As well as Hélène Osório, who also highlights the importance of the act of naming a territory by pointing out that, quote, "The act of naming a place or a landform is the first step towards its knowledge and its appropriation. The consequence of land concessions in this unnamed place of unknown extent is the undefinition of property, which prevents it from being absolute." End quote. And taking this into account, and in order to understand the employment of cartography in the process of territorialization, we use the approach developed by the geographer Robert Morais about territorial formation and his concept of territory. Morais deals with the society-space relationship as something that involves both natural and unnatural processes, appropriation included among the latter. Regardless, they are all processes that involve the performance of groups and social actors driven by certain intents, thus characterizing the valorization of space, that is, at the same time, quote, "a teleological process that is supported by projects and guided by conceptions of specific social actors," end quote, and also involves, quote, "representations, discourse, consciences, and practical articulations," end quote. Thus, considering the concept of territory as something that has as its defining element the valorization of space, and departing from the contextualization and historicization of this process, it is possible to seize the movement of territorial formation, as well as its agents, or specifically in our case, to analyze how the political decisions of the Portuguese crown and its agents exercised this social use through cartography for the formation of the desired territory and its naming. I don't know what happened here. Okay. As such, and based on its counter hypothesis of toponymic appropriation, we sought to analyze the prevalence of Portuguese toponyms in José Custódio de Sá Faria's cartography of Rio Grande de São Pedro between the decades of 1150 and 1170. In order to check if there is a process of toponymic appropriation through cartography. Regarding the hypothesis, the author comments that quote, "The maps produced at the time constituted another resource for the liquidation of corporate jurisdictions, as intended by the Pombalin Consulate. Of the most visible aspects of the Pombalin reformism, the Lusitανization of toponyms was just one of those that, after all, tried to affirm new ways of full appropriation of land ownership." End quote. As an example for this analysis, in the 1167 map, we can see that the letter B, right here in the circle, represents the terrain conquered by the Portuguese during the war. And what strikes our attention in this map is the Portuguese toponymy that is present precisely in that space defined by the legend, while the rest of the hydrography outside that space is predominantly indigenous. Besides, the delimited region also corresponds to a strategically important territory for the defense of Viamão. Its purpose was to avoid the reaching of the north of the Portuguese territory in a supposed invasion to the region by the Spaniards. Moreover, the name of the hydrography itself was an important aid to navigation. So having made these considerations, and when comparing the prevalence of toponyms between the 1150s and 1160s on the maps through the quantitative exercise, it is possible to observe in a first moment for the 1150s the predominance of the indigenous toponymy, whereas in the cartography of the 1160s, there is an abrupt change in the pattern of use of these toponyms. The conclusion, therefore, is that what happens is an overlap of the Portuguese toponymy over the indigenous, suggesting a gradual appropriation of the territory through the Lusitανization of the names attributed to the disputed spaces. It is important to remember that this is a preliminary conclusion based on a larger hypothesis that still needs to be compared to the cartographic production of the other Portuguese cartographers of the time, as well as Faria's own production, referring now to 1170s. However, still within this initial proposal, it is possible to understand the possibility of using these maps as a way to claim the desired territories. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariana. That was faster than most people, so yay. This means we have plenty of time for questions and discussion, if anybody. I've got 3 questions have built up, 4 questions maybe for Mariana, and I'm going to ask them in the sequence in which I've seen them. The first one is from Carla Loa, and who asks that despite the rise of Portuguese place names on the maps that you've been analyzing, indigenous place names still persist. But a question is, did they also persist, remain alive in other documents concerning local populations?
So yes, we are still testing this hypothesis for these upcoming centuries, another centuries, but the study is already in the beginning, so we still have to test this in other centuries. But yes, the toponyms of the indigenous people still are present. We can see that in the maps, in the locations nowadays. So but my answer to this question is that we still are studying that in another centuries that are not the 18th century. So, but yes, it still remains.
Thank you. And there's a follow-up from Seth Segal, who's thinking about the diagrams that you showed. And in the 1770s, it's clear there were many more place names on the maps. Does this mean that the appropriation, the territorial appropriation, was more about naming places that had been unnamed, at least on the maps, or was it more about renaming indigenous places or replacing indigenous place names?
Okay, I think we have the two cases of changing some names and creating others. My colleague Manuel will present in the session 3, and we'll talk more about this and the toponymic zones in the same territory. So I can suggest you guys to listen to him. And because I don't have it exactly an answer to this question, because as I said, it's everything is in the beginning. We are studying that already, but I think we have the two cases. But it's an interesting movement to observe and to study about.
Thank you. Yes, I'm on. So I'm going to pass on. There are a couple of very specific questions from Liz Chant that you might want to look at separately. It's very specific. But Denisa asks if you could repeat, if you could load up your last slide. And she asks, can we conclude that the Spanish toponyms prevail over the Portuguese in the 1760s? And then she has a couple more very particular questions about particular place names.
Okay, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, so if you're able to put your last slide back up.
Okay.
And so Denisa is asking, can we conclude?
Okay.
I need to go to my note here. Can we conclude that Spanish place names prevail over the Portuguese in the 1760s?
Over the Portuguese? No.
No. Or the other way around, maybe, is what Denise is asking.
Should I stop share?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And we've gone through that one. And I've got a question that I don't quite understand from Lucia Rodriguez. Yes, and Denise just confirmed that she made a confusion with the colors. So yes, we should have inverted the question. I'm going to wrap this up here because I don't understand these questions, and we're about to run out of time. There is a note on the chat from Secretary Isabel for the link and the password for the post-session chat. If you want to keep talking to the speakers, please sign into those new sessions sort of out in the hallway. And then there is the next session. No, I'm sorry, I completely got that wrong. Hey, this is a new thing for me. We don't have a hall chat. These are the posts that are for the links for the next book chat and then the next two sessions. So thank you for both of our speakers, and I hope that we can all stick our reactions and give our speakers a great virtual round of applause. Thank you very much. We're done. Thanks, guys. Good papers. And I'm going to end this meeting.